And we're live. So it's week 3. Thanks everyone for showing up. Thanks for you guys who showed up online. That's awesome. I'll actually stop my screen share just so I can say hi. I'll share my screen. We're going to do a lot of commands today. I'm going to build on what we did last week. Very similar to last week. I'm going to have you guys run a history command, but I'm going to have a little bit of a twist, and it's going to be a little bit different than it was. Let me make sure that's presented to everyone. Okay, good. In that I'm not going to show you exactly how to get a different display manager or a different desktop environment installed, but I'll show you kind of how to get that done. And the assignment will be to install a different desktop environment and use it and show me your history from that different desktop environment. And obviously I'll be explaining what a desktop environment is, what GNOME is, what KDE is, and all the others like Mate, and I can't even think of the others. So, Honky is not a desktop environment.
Oh no, it's a.
It's just a tool.
Yeah.
So,
Optimization.
no, it's a worthless resource hog that just shows graphs that are completely meaningless. Anyway, so I'm going to start by going over some of the commands that we went over. I haven't done this in the past because I always have a terminal open, but I kind of wanted to touch on it because I know some of you might be a little bit confused. The activities menu up here in the upper left is how you get to everything on the default desktop environment, which is GNOME. And it pops up this. I have all my windows that are open here. I can also then just start typing to search for terminal. Or alternatively, there's this app button, which is basically the same app button that you'd have on a phone. And it'll show all of the different programs that are installed. And I have more than that, but this is just the frequent list. If you go to all, it shows all of the programs you have installed. And I recommend kind of looking around, see what you have installed. Also, I think I've already mentioned it like last week or the week before, the software application where you can download things, install some stuff, see what it's like. We'll be going I can't talk today. We'll go over it soon enough, but Wine is pretty cool. It's a not necessarily an emulator, but it's a Windows application compatibility layer that lets you run Windows programs on Linux. It's particularly useful for games. So if you guys are at all interested in games, Wine will be something you'll probably be interested in. So, jumping in commands. I'm actually going to close this terminal and open up a new one. So we're completely fresh, just like you guys would be. And I included a list in the Blackboard announcement today of all of the commands that I'll be going over today, and they're just good commands to know and know how to use. I don't expect that you guys are going to memorize even probably a quarter of these. That's okay. Write this down, keep it, save it in a file so that you can reference it when you need to. Hopefully, just kind of seeing what it is will help jog your memory a little bit. But the first one is PWD, which is print working directory. We went over this. This shows you what directory or what folder you're in. And if you guys can recall, directory is basically a synonym for folder. So right here, you can tell that I'm in my home directory, which is home Steve. I can tell what user I am, and this is completely new, by saying, who am I? My username is obviously Steve. And I'll get to why this is important shortly. Who will also show you who is logged into the system. Now, because I'm just a user, this will only show me. If I am root, let's say I do a sudo -i, or just let's say sudo, because su stands for super user do or switch user do. Basically, it's like a Simon Says of your computer. sudo lets you run privileged commands. So when you selected make myself an administrator, that allows you to run system level commands. So if I do a sudo who am I, and I enter my password, it should give me root. So sudo, without any arguments, lets me run commands as root, or the root is somewhat synonymous with the administrator, the built-in administrator account in Windows. So that's kind of why it's important. It's also important to know that you shouldn't run like a desktop environment. You shouldn't run a lot of programs as root. Now, being root is really helpful and really useful. And I recommend if you're going to use sudo, instead of saying sudo, run command, that takes a long time to, if you have like 15 commands to do, it would take forever to type sudo in front of all of it, and kind of pointless, honestly. So I actually recommend doing sudo-i, which drops you to an interactive shell. And if you see, I am my shell icon changed, not icon, but indicator changed, and it also shows that my user right here, root, at Saturn instead of Steve at Saturn. If I do a who am I, it obviously tells me I'm root. Also, who is important now because it still only shows that I am logged in, and this is because I've only elevated myself to root, not logged in in a root context. I believe, and testing my knowledge here, exit also quits the shell, so let's say you're in a sudo-i and you want to get back to your normal shell, you just type exit to get out of it. It's also a synonym for logout, so I could just have easily said logout instead of exit. If I do a su, actually I think it's just su. Let's see, password, what is my root password? Huh, that's weird. I think you actually have to log in. No. Come on, there's a little thing to mute. I think we're good. Sorry about that. So you do have to be logged in. I'm still getting an echo. Okay. How about now? I think we're good. So you do actually have to log in a root shell. Like when your computer first boots up and it asks you for your login, that's when it will actually count under who. Actually, maybe it will. Let's do a little bit of testing. I don't remember this well, so it's good. Good that we're experimenting with this. It also kind of shows the usefulness of knowing a few of these things. I think it's who. Let's just do a help, a very useful command like we talked about last week. Let's do a who-a. Oh, there we go. Still doesn't show that I'm root, but it does show that the system is in run level 5 and that I am the only one logged in. And that's because I'm the only one logged in a terminal. Or this TTY2 shows that I'm logged in on terminal number 2. There are a set of virtual terminals on every Linux box. Usually, most distributions have, I think, 7 different virtual terminals, and usually put the graphical side, the GUI, on either 1 or 2. And you can test this out. I'm not going to do it because it'll stop the screen share. But if you do a Control-Alt-F1 or Control-F2, it'll drop you into a text mode console where you can log in and actually run these same sort of commands. And if you would have been on any sort of Linux box or Unix box, probably with 20, 15 years ago, they would have now had a GUI at all and just had the text terminals. And it's actually kind of cool because you can log in multiple people at the same time in each of those virtual terminals. Actually, I can probably show it with my VM, but it's not important right now. Who just shows this. Who shows who is logged in, and who-a shows us everyone that's logged in, even non-user logins. Because these aren't technically logins, but it shows that that's going on. I'm also going to talk about run levels and what run level 5 means. It's a little bit complicated. Boy, I didn't put clear on this list. Clear is important. So I've got sudo. I'm actually going to go back and do a sudo -i because that's my preferred method. And we'll keep going on the commands. One of the most important things to know how to do, especially on servers, but on your client system too, is to know what processes are running. And PS, that's what PS is for. It shows that I'm running the PS command, it shows I'm running bash, and it shows I'm running sudo. And these are just under root. This is probably one of the most used commands I use as a systems administrator because I have to log into systems, I have to know what's running. Half the time there's some process that's become a zombie and I have to go kill it. And a zombie process is a process that is dead and that it won't respond to any signals that are sent to it, but it's still running, sort of, so it's both alive and dead, hence zombie. And so I use PS, and there are different sorts of switches that you can use. If you look at help, actually, you know what? This'll go for the next thing I have on my list, which is man. And man is short for manual. Let's say man PS. It gives us a very detailed set of information about what is provided by the command. It gives a detail of what the name is. It says report a snapshot of the current running processes. Gives us a synopsis and description with, if we scroll down, examples of how to use it. And there's two different syntaxes, however you pronounce that are used. There's the standard syntax and the BSD syntax. They do the same thing. So, for example, a PS-EF should give me basically the same information as a PSAX. Personally, I'm a bigger fan of the BSD style of syntax for PS. So, you know, PSAUX shows me all of the processes on a system. And with the EF, shows me the same thing. So there are two different ways of getting the same information, and it's really easy to look up just by using the man page. And there are man pages for pretty much every command. Although I would say that the --help modifier or argument to commands is much more helpful because not every program is in man. Especially if you're installing software that isn't, you know, from like a local repository, or you've compiled your own program, or you've compiled somebody else's program. Generally, that doesn't come with the man pages. So the --help is a little bit more helpful, but man pages are very, very useful and awesome if you don't know exactly what you're doing. Show you we're in root again. Let's say we've already gone over CD last week, but let's say we want to go back to my home directory. I'm there, and I can list out what's there. One thing we didn't go over was touch. Say you want to create a new file with just the terminal. To create a new empty file, I can just do touch. Touch a file. And if we do an ls, we see there's now a file called a file. And if we do an ls-l, there's this file right here, a file, and it was modified at 1915, February 4th, and it has a 0 byte size. And actually, touch, the reason it's called touch is to update timestamps, modified timestamps on files. So, for example, I don't want to change the modified, I don't want to change anything about my keyring RC config right here, but I want to change the last modified date stamp. Instead of saying January 25th, I want it to say February 4th. So I can do touch keyring rc.config. Oh, I just realized that I'm not explaining something, and it's just second nature to me, and it's the most awesomest thing about Linux. Tab completion. So if I go touch here, and I just do key, all I had to do was hit the tab key, and it automatically populated out the entire length of the file, so I didn't have to type it out. I'm not that fast at typing, and I honestly don't like typing that much. So tab definitely helps you from typing lots and lots and lots of useless characters. When generally, if you have, you might have to type 5 to 10 characters, especially, if there's a lot of files with similar names. But that's a lot less than most file names are going to be. So highly recommend tab completion. Anyway, I'm going to touch that file, and if we do another ls-l, you see that the size is the same, but the timestamp is changed. This was originally designed for backing up, but the usefulness of this is actually more often used now to create files, because if the file doesn't exist to update the timestamp on, it'll just create the file, which is empty. So, long explanation for a very simple command. Do you have your mic on? Okay, good. Got a little distracted there. Sorry.
They're showing cd.not.
I will go over relative file paths.
Okay.
Clear this though. We went over touch, CP, and MV. CP is short for copy, and MV is short for move. Move is actually a little bit. It's a multi-purpose command because it's a good way. It's how you rename files as well. So let's say I want to copy a file and I want to call it now a new file. Copy and move both take arguments in the source and destination. So I want to copy this file to another file. If I were to say CP a different file to a file, it's not going to work because there's no such file that exists. But if I get CP a file to a different, it works because I just copied it there. Now I've got a bunch of file, a new file. And I didn't put this in here, but I'm going to do it because it's useful, which is RM, which stands for remove. I'm going to remove those files because I don't need any of them. I can remove a file. I can remove a different file. I can remove, what was the other one? I hit tab there twice, and it gave me all of the files and directories in my local directory. And this is where relative file paths will come in very, very shortly. So I'm going to remove a new file. And if you guys noticed, when I hit tab twice there, it put a dot in front of a lot of these files and directories. I'm not sure why. Oh, I know why. The reason it did that is to hide a file in Linux, you just put a dot in front of it. So let's go back here. Oops, not caps lock. And I'm going to touch a hidden file. If I do an ls, I don't see a hidden file because it had the dot at the beginning of it. But dots have different meanings depending on how you use them. If a file or a directory has a dot in it, it becomes hidden. But by doing a double tab, it shows me all files and folders, not just the ones that are non-hidden. So I'm going to remove a hidden file. The other meaning of dots, so let's say I want a cd dot. What did that do? Well, effectively it did nothing, because dot always references the local directory you're in. And this is important when you're doing RM. So if I do this, this is saying the local directory I'm in with a file. I'm going to create a file to remove. And the reason I recommend doing it like this with remove is that remove can be very dangerous. Remove, if you are running as root, if you say were to screw up in typing and you said rm/, that will delete every file on your system. And because you are root, now if you are root, it will delete every file in your system. There are no protections other than just knowing to not type that. So don't do this. It's very dangerous. In fact, if you really want to find things to not do, is do an rm-rf/. That just forces its way through the entire file system and deletes everything. I actually did this on a system one time just to see what would happen, and it was slow, but it did delete every file on the system. The system was still somewhat usable because things were running out of memory. The programs were running out of memory, so they could still exist. But as soon as you rebooted, there was nothing left, and no place for it to come from. So when you're removing files, do a // because at least if you would do a /. And get it messed up that way, you're not going to delete anything because there are no hidden files in the root of the file system. And we can see that by doing an ls. Actually, ls-a for all files. It only shows a dot and a ... inside of the root of the file system. And this just / stands for the root of the file system. If I do a pwd, you can see that I'm at root of the file system, home directory, and Steve directory under that. And that first / is always the root of the file system. Also, there's two special directories here, the dot and the ... And we already went over the dot as being the current directory, which looks a little weird, but it is, a real thing. For example, if I do an ls-a on this, actually, let's do an ls-la on this directory. This is useful for seeing what the permissions are on a directory if you're inside the directory. So these are the permissions on that directory of my home folder. It's owned by me, and it's execute. Apparently, people in the group can go inside of my home directory. So the other, what's ls-l, okay. The other directory, special directory in there, is ... which this isn't a real directory, but it stands for the parent directory. So, for example, I'm in home Steve. If I do a cd ... it will take me one directory above that, or to the home directory, which you can see now I'm in the home directory. So this is useful let's say I don't want to change directories every time I want to modify a file. Let's say I want to I touched a file inside my inside my home directory while I'm in the home directory. So I'm in home. It's very awkward. I should probably choose a different location to do this. But now in my home directory, there's a file with a timestamp of 1925, which was right now. Okay. I'm sure this is going over a lot of you guys' heads, and that's okay. The good thing about this is it's on a video. You can come back to it, watch it later. This will start to make a little bit more sense. If you can keep track of what directory you're in, it makes it useful. So, like I created a file in the directory above me. Let's say I want to create a file in the directory below me. I can do touch .. a file and do an ls-la on .. and you can see that file is there with the appropriate timestamp. So that's that. I got RM. I've got more or less head, tail, and cat. These sets of commands are all related to viewing text files. And there are a lot of text files in Linux, and everything is configured through a text file. I actually really like that everything's a text file, like configured through a text file in Linux, because I have a little bit of a rant today, because I've spent all day trying to figure out why a Microsoft Active Directory Federation Services proxy server won't pass the right sort of authentication mechanism between the internet and my local intranet. And it's driving me nuts because all I have is a set of like 15 windows and GUIs that I have to wade through to figure out basically two things. And in Linux, it's pretty much like you might have 3 or 4 different text files, but that's it. That's all the configuration. So I much prefer having it all kind of in one place. It's a little bit more terse. It's a little bit easier to make mistakes with text files, but it's so much easier to read and so much easier to maintain when you're dealing with large, complex installations. So, that being said, what is more? More, actually, I'm going to go get a file. I get a file, new public license. I want a good set of text that I can show you guys. I just want to download it. Where I just want to get it. Plain text. There we go. Hey, you get a bonus command in this. I'm going to do a wget. I think wget's installed by default. Hey, it is. Wget allows you to download a file from the command line, which is pretty awesome. So I just downloaded that file. We can see it, ls-la, and I'm going to say for GPL. It's right there. It was modified in 2007, but now I get to show you some commands and why that's useful. These commands, particularly, let's do head first, since that's what I put first. Head shows you the top of the file. So if I do head GPL 3, it shows me by default, I think it's the first 10 or 15 lines, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines. And if I wanted to see more, let's say I want to see the first 5 lines. It takes the operator -in for number of lines 5. Tail is very similar to head in that it only shows me the last 10 lines. Or it also allows me to do last 5 lines. So it's pretty handy if you want to look through a set of text This is awesome for logs. Tail is awesome for logs because logs work by inserting a new line at the end of the file. So every log entry is at one file level longer. So if you just have tail, you can see the last few lines of your log, which is generally the last couple seconds of your log, which is awesome. And then if I want to see the whole file, I can just use cat GPL. It shows me everything. But that's too big to see on one line, so we can either do less GPL and scroll through it. I think we went through a little bit of this last week, but I did a cat GPL and I piped it to less, and it does the exact same thing. One reason you might use cat instead of doing less, so let's say I did a cat of GPL and I'm like, oh crap, that's too long, like I can't see all of that. I can just hit up in my command history buffer and just hit up and then put a pipe less on there instead of typing out cat, or not cat, but less GPL3 text. For longer commands, it really gets useful to just basically hit up and modify the last command than going through and retyping an entirely new command. Sometimes pipes are useful, like straight off, like making long, complicated commands with pipes, but pipes are awesome. They basically take the output of this command, which is the entire file, and take all of that output and push it to this other file or this other program called less. That's effectively what it's doing. But there are also other special redirectors. If you guys have ever written in C or C++, this will make a little bit of sense. But this caret, this greater than symbol, what that does is it redirects all of the output to a file. Where pipe redirects to another program, this redirects to a file. So this cat GPL-3.txt to new GPL.txt basically is the same as saying CP GPL new GPL. Yes, I already did it. But to show you that that works, this also, just a single, overwrites everything in that file. So if I do a less of new GPL, you can see it's the same file. There's not anything different than the first one. And this will, kind of as the semester wears on, there'll be some examples of why this is useful. Just using it with cat generally isn't useful. But it's a good demonstration of how it works. Now let's say instead of overwriting that file, I want to append. I use another greater than symbol, and now I have a file that's twice as long. If I do a ls, and now I'm going to pipe to another favorite command of mine called grep. We can see there are two there, and I'm going to do an ls-l to show you file sizes. This file size is exactly twice that of this. That's because I took and basically I copied it first in there, and then I copied it again into the same file. So now I have two copies of the GNU public license in one file. Completely useless. And if we do a less of new GPL, if we scroll long enough, the top of the file it says GNU General Public License. And if we get down here far enough, we'll see it repeat. Good question. What does grep do? Grep allows me to search in an output. Let's say that was tedious. I don't know how I would have found that. It would have been pretty painful. So let's say we want to grep GNU in this file. Let's say GNU public license. I think that's how they spell it. We'll see. Oh, spell it. It allows me to search a file. So right there, you can see GNU General Public License. It's all caps. That's why. You can see just by searching for that one line, not only does it highlight it for me, which is kind of cool, but it also shows me where that is in the file and shows me that it's in there twice. So I've copied the file in there twice. So what grep does is allows you to, it actually I think is for, let's see, man grep. See, nope, it does not say what it stands for. I think the rep or the RE in grep is regular expressions, but don't hold me to that. My memory isn't always the best. Anyway, grep allows you to just search a certain
Global regular expression print.
Then what's the G?
Global.
Global.
Global regular expression.
Global regular expression print. So I was right. The RE does stand for regular expression. Learn regular expressions. They're evil. Grep is useful though. Regular expressions are ways to search, and grep is just a way to search through text. This is also useful. Like, say I want to know. Well, in this, right, I want to know which lines have this new GNU General on them, right? I can see that it's in there twice, but where are they? Grep also takes a dash in, and it shows me line numbers. It shows me on line 1 and line 675 are these two lines. So grep is an incredibly useful tool. If you combine this with like tail, like say you're looking for a specific event in a log, you can do a tail and pipe that to grep. And so you can tail a log file and then look for specific output in that log file. So these are incredibly useful commands. And again, don't have to memorize all these. I get there's a lot going on here. And a lot of this really isn't something that most people use hardly ever. Even people like me, systems administrators, don't use command line all that much. I wish they used it more because it would make my profession a lot easier to deal with people. Because then it would just be like, hey, run this command, not go through these 5 esoteric menus and, you know, stand on your head and, you know, say something, some weird magic incantation. I can't stand that. Like, commands are a lot more succinct and useful for getting the job done. All right, we already went over sudo and su uname. Ooh, this is really useful. If you ever come across a non-Linux system, let's say you get into a system, you log into a system, all you have is a text terminal. You have a fairly good idea that it's Bash, but you don't know what sort of system it is. Like you think, well, maybe it's Linux, maybe it's Apple, maybe well, you'd know if it's an Apple, maybe it's something else. The way you can know that is by doing a uname. Uname, and particularly uname-a, tells you information about the system, particularly what system, what kernel it's running. For example, if I were to run this on Mac, I don't have a Mac, so I'm just going to Google uname OS X, and it will tell us. There should be some images. Let's go for images. Oh yeah, look at that. So you can run a uname-a on a Mac computer, and instead of saying Linux, it will say Darwin. And Darwin is just the kernel, or the actual core of the operating system that Apple uses. And that is just a grainy and terrible screenshot. I don't even know why it's there. But here we go. That is slightly more readable. Seriously, Google? Maybe it's just the...
An African village with all that billion.
What's that?
You could feed an African village with all the billion in that.
Anyway, you can see that it has the kernel name, which is Darwin instead of Linux, and then gives information about that. If you logged into a AIX system, you would see something very similar. Where is it? Nope, that's Linux. I want AIX. Seriously, no one here has AIX? That's definitely Ubuntu. Nope, telnetted into another Linux system. Apparently they don't have AIX, but let's see if they have HPUX or something like that. Nope, apparently not. I can't click. Anyway, this isn't just a Linux command. This is a general Unix command. Come on, HPUX, give me something. Anyway, moving on. It's not just, this is useful in a lot of different situations and helps you kind of orient yourself to what sort of system you're dealing with. I still, like, if you ever run across a VMware system and you SSH into a VMware system, if you run a uname-a, it will actually say GNU Linux at the end, and I'm not sure why. They say it's not based off of Linux, but that part of the uname makes me kind of worried that they might at least have some link back to Linux. But if you do that on a VMware system, it'll say VMware here instead of Linux, obviously. Anyway, uname just helps you get oriented. And actually, I don't remember what uname stands for. Unix name, probably. I'm going with it. We went over history. History shows your command history. This is actually really useful if you want to know what you've done. I use this to look up really long, complicated commands that I don't remember. I just use history to kind of basically be my self-filling documentation. Really useful. Locate, find. Okay, let's do locate and find. Ooh, and get into some of my favorite commands. All right, locate. I don't know if Fedora comes with it by default. Someone will have to fact check me on this. But if it's not, you do a DNF install of mlocate. And obviously mine's already installed, so it'll say skipping, nothing to do, complete. And if you run an update db as root, what locate is useful for is it builds an index of all the files that are on your file system and then allows you to search through them very quickly. Find also allows you to search through your file system, but it's really slow because there's no index. But let's say I want to locate man pages. I'll just say locate man. It just gave me a list of everything that has man in the file name. And that's a lot. That's more than I know how to deal with right now. But just scrolling, like, okay, let's say this is a useful scenario. We'll pipe this to less. Now I can scroll through this and scroll up and down with the keyboard instead of having to, use a mouse. I like staying with a keyboard because it saves time. If you have to move your hand away from the keyboard to a mouse, you're losing time that you could just be, going at things and getting things done. Yeah, it's kind of like it might be a little bit hardcore to be a keyboard-only sort of guy, but it's useful. I can also grep this for a certain set of output, like let's look for modules right there. But that's still too much, so I'll have to do less to that. And that's still too much information. Maybe I want to grep for SE Linux because I know there's a smaller, not pipe it to SE Linux, but grep SE Linux. And so now it starts narrowing down the results of what I'm looking for a little bit better. Or instead of grep se Linux, let's say I only want to see these ones that have 100 in it, or anything that has db in it and module. So I can chain these together, and as far as I know, there's no limit to how long a command can be. If there is, it's like long. But there are better ways of doing this. But if you don't know those better ways, this will get the job done. So just between a few sets of really simple commands like locate, grep, and pipes, you can really get fine-grained into what you're looking for on a Linux system. And this will come into play, especially later on and next week, because we're going to be going over setting up a web server and setting up Apache, and you'll have to look at your log files. You'll have to look through things and find different bits of information, and this will come in really handy. I also showed DNF and Yum. We talked about that quite a bit last week, about what DNF is, which is dandified Yum, which DNF and Yum take the same arguments. They're basically the same thing. They have Yum actually is. I think there's actually a couple features that are still in Yum but aren't in DNF yet. But for the most part, I think there's feature parity. It is worth mentioning that there are other systems out there. In the Debian world or in the Ubuntu world, there's apt-get, which is just another way of downloading packages and installing packages on your system. Personally, I don't like apt-get. I like that removing packages is a little bit easier with apt-get, but I've had very, very rarely, very rarely do I ever remove packages from my system. So personally, I prefer Yum because it's a little bit more of a one-stop shop, in that I can search for packages, I can download packages, I can remove packages, I can do pretty much anything I want to do just with Yum or DNF itself, and not have to go to other different tools. apt-get is just a downloader and installer. It just goes and downloads and installs stuff. You have to use other utilities like apt-cache search to look through the package list and see what you can install. So I like Yum. It's a little bit friendlier if you're just working a command line, but it's worth mentioning that there is out there. Also, OpenSUSE has Zypper, which is Zypper, which is another way of managing packages on your system. Any of these is like light years beyond what Windows does, and it might sound like I bash Windows a lot because I hate Windows, but Windows does have its place in the world, and for a client operating system, even I'll admit it's pretty hard to beat Windows for that. But one thing they don't have is a good package management system, and Yum, apt-get, and Zypper are light years beyond even what Apple has for package management. So,
where's it gotten updates from?
Oh, good question. So, with every distribution, they maintain certain package lists. So, for example, I'll just do a DNF check update. And this goes and periodically will, if its cache is out of date, like I'll do a DNF clean all, and I'll do a DNF check update again. And what this does is it goes out to those predefined locations and downloads the package lists. These are maintained by the distribution maintainers. So in this case, the Fedora team maintains these repositories. But you can also modify that and use your own repositories if you want. And they're stored in just files of the configuration of where the URLs to where those package lists are, and it's just a list of files basically. If I do a cat of etc. DNF dot was it yum dot repos dot d. Let's do a good one. Do Fedora dot repo. a grep HTTP. So, for example, right here, if I click on this, open link. Obviously, this is going to get me nowhere. But this is just a link to out on the internet. These right here are variables where it has the $release var, so that's 23 for Fedora 23, and then base arch, which is the architecture. For most of you, it's x86 64. So if we go, in this case, I'm using everything, and I'm using x86 64 and OS and packages, and here they're all broken up by letter, but these are all of the packages that start with the letter E. And so it just uses this as a list of what it can download if it needs to go and get new packages. And this is constantly being maintained by the distribution maintainers. And so when I do a DNF, check update, what it does is it'll go out, and inside here, there's actually a folder, up one, called repo data, and it's downloading this file right here, which is actually a list of, basically a link to all of those different files and what they are. And they're obviously compressed, but even compressed, it's 12 megs. So, and if you go to repomd, that's just XML configuration. So, a little bit complicated, but it's what it is. Ooh, BG and FG and alias and file. Let's do alias and file first. Like I said last week, Control-C kills the current application that's running. But one thing I didn't talk about, let's say you have a long-running program. Let's say a GUI program, right? Let's say I want to run Firefox. Now, if I just say Firefox and I don't do anything, I can't use this terminal anymore because Firefox is running. So if I want to use this terminal again, what I can do is I can pause the current running task by hitting Control-Z, and it stops that task, Firefox. But now Firefox, I can't do anything with it. It's frozen, right? Because it's stopped. The process is stopped. I basically made it a zombie. Now, to keep it running in the background, what I can do is hit BG, and that will automatically background or take that task and resume it, but in the background. And now if you see, if I click on these tabs, it works. Whereas before, if I do, now to bring this back to the foreground, I hit FG, and that brings this back to the foreground where I can't use it, and I can stop it again. And now if I click on these tabs, it doesn't do anything because this process is literally stopped. So it allows me to run multiple programs on a single terminal at once. It also put this symbol right here, that little and symbol. This is, let's say you know a program is going to take forever and you don't want to hang up your terminal like this did. Like, you know, obviously that didn't work. So if I do Firefox and take a cue from what it did and just put that and at the end, it automatically backgrounds it, and now I can use it without needing to worry about my terminal being locked up. I can use my terminal and I can use Firefox at the same time by that running in the background. Also, if we do PS, we can see now that Firefox is running. Someone's jamming out.
Oh.
Dude, turn the music down.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's all right.
So bad.
Oh my god. Are you on the class right now?
Kinda.
Twitch.
Right. I'm gonna mute you right now.
What is this for?
Okay, so that's backgrounding tasks, and you can see that the task is running by just running PS, and it's running there in the background. And this, when I started it, it said it was process. This is the process ID, and you can see right here the process ID, or PID, is 2736. So it's the same as this right here. I'm actually going to kill Firefox. Die. Where's my thing here? Alias and file. What do I have here? Let's do file. File is a cool command because it tells you, unlike Linux, or unlike Windows, Linux actually doesn't care about file extensions that much. So you can see here I have a file that has a .py ending, and then I have this right here that's green, and this file here, and this file has got a txt, and this one's a CFG. How do I know what files those are? You know, in Windows it's easy because you just look at the file extension and it'll tell you what the file is. But in Linux they don't care. Like in most Unixes, they don't care what the file extension is. There's actually this program called file that tells you what sort of file a file is. So if we do file a file, it's empty. But if we do file, let's say mercurial keyring, it's a Python script. If we look at pubkey, it'll say that the PGP public key block public key. That's a lot of public key repetition. Also, if I do pubkey2, it's the same thing. What about Winetricks? File Winetricks. It's a POSIX shell script encoded in UTF-8. So instead of being ASCII like this Python file, it's in UTF-8. And it can tell this by actually looking at the binary of the file. If I were to do, let's say which class, not which PS. Okay, this is an actual program, right? If I do a file on that program, which is the process we were just talking about, we can see it's an ELF executable, which ELF stands for executable and linkable format. That's the type of executable format that's on pretty much all Linux systems. OS X uses something else. I forget the name off the top of my head. Windows obviously uses their own format. I have a couple of Windows programs on here. Let's see if I can show you downloads. I downloaded Caesar 3. You can see it's a PE32 executable for Windows. So Linux doesn't care what the file extensions are. I could change that to something else entirely, and it would tell me what the file is because it doesn't care about the file extension. Although file extensions are handy to use. And the last thing I have, I think we went over. I'm not going to go over it. Well, yeah, okay. Alias. I'll go over alias. If you just run as a command, shows you all of your aliases. So, for example, if you guys have paid close attention, instead of typing ls-l, I've typed ll, which is an alias to ls-l. So an alias, what it allows you to do is take, basically make a shortcut of, instead of typing out ls-l every time, I could just type ll, and it'll do ls-l. So if I had a command that I wanted to run a lot, well, and this is default, right? This is the default aliases, and these are just like handy things like color auto that allows the colors to show up. That's why when I grep things, it turned red. The reason it was red is because grep itself is an alias to grep with turning color on. Same thing with LL and LS and MingGW32, which is the C compiler for Windows. Move-I interactive. So when I do a move or an RM or a copy, the -I says ask if you want to move or copy something, because if you don't ask, it will just do it without asking you and potentially delete or overwrite files. So these are defaults, but I could just as easily say, ASDF, so alias ASDF equals, ls-a-lh, right? Oh, and I gotta add in ~color equals auto, because why not? So now I can type in ASDF, and it runs that command for me. If I run alias, it shows me now that ASDF is equal to ls-alh with ~color auto. So it's a simple way to make, to kind of customize your command line environment and do some, I think, some pretty cool stuff. And it's useful too if you're trying to figure out why command's doing something that's not in the documentation. If you run an alias, you'd be like, oh, well, it's not doing that because it has all these other switches added onto it. All right, the only other thing I haven't gone over is and, which is kind of stupid that they do this, because most of these, like if you double them up, it kind of makes some logical sense. But let's say I want to do an ls-l, and then I want to run another command, which is pwd. That just chains those two commands together, but it doesn't just chain them together. It says only run the second command if the first one is successful. So this would be useful if I did like a DNF update, and then I logged out. So I don't want to log out of the system if my system doesn't properly update. So that's where and is useful. You'll see this occasionally, and honestly, this is something that even I recently didn't know a whole lot about. So I get to teach you guys something that even I learned recently. And I've been using Linux for, what, 10, 12 years? Something like that. I feel old now. I went over Control-C and Control-Z. Control-C, let's say you are in a program, you don't know how to get out of it, like less of GPL.txt. I went over last week how to get out of less is Q, but if I don't know that, I can just hit Control-C. Control-C doesn't work. I have to hit Q. Vim does it. So if I hit Control-C in Vim, it says, hey, I'm not going to accept Control-C as output, but I know you want to quit, so type Control-Q, quit. Text editors, there is a great holy war in the Linux and Unix community. And the great holy war is between Vim and Emacs. Emacs and Vim are just, like I opened up this file, and now I can edit the file. I've added my vandalism in the GNU public license, and it's there. I prefer Vim. It's handy. It does a lot of really cool things. Emacs is also pretty cool. It does a lot of cool things. Do I not? I don't even have it installed. Let's install it. Also going to install Nano because I don't think it's on here. Hopefully I didn't screw this up when I cleared my cache. Sometimes it takes a while to regenerate all the cache lists, like all the cache of all the package lists, and I think I screwed it up. Do a DNF clean all again. There we go. Hopefully the internet's okay here. It's doing okay. But it is a testament to how many packages there are in Fedora. That's the default Fedora repository. And that 43 megabytes is basically just the description of all of the packages that are in Fedora. So that's 43 megs of compressed text of all the packages. So that's a lot. There are a lot of things you can install. Of course, I've added in like the Spotify repository because Spotify is awesome. I also added in a Chromium repository and a couple other repositories. I highly recommend, I probably won't go over a whole lot, but I recommend going and looking and seeing what you guys can find on repositories because they allow you to add new software, like, for example, Spotify onto your system. And Spotify on Fedora works great. I like it. If you guys don't know what Spotify is, it's a music streaming service.
Everybody knows what Spotify is.
Oh, there are some people. Wow, this is slow. Maybe I'll skip it. Emacs is just another text mode editor. Nano is the same way. I might have Nano installed. Nope. The cool thing, though, is I typed in a command I know exists, and it's like, hey, do you want to install Nano to provide Nano? Yeah. Hey, look at that. So Nano is another text editor. I don't like Nano. Because it uses all these weird, like, Control X. No. I don't really like it. But maybe it's because I haven't used it. It's honestly not a very full-featured editor like Emacs or Vim. Vim allows me to do very complex find replaces with the command line, like stuff that you would normally use. I mean, it's basically like an old-school IDE for development. Like you can do a lot of really cool things. It does syntax highlighting of like HTML files. Let's say Vim, etc., or no, var www HTML index. You can see this is a very simple HTML file, but it has all the pretty syntax highlighting. I like pretty syntax highlighting. That's it for today. A lot of commands, a lot of things. I want to see a history, but like I said before, I want you to install a separate desktop environment. So a little bit more about desktop environments. I recommend going out to Wikipedia, going out to the internet, researching it for yourself a little bit. But what a desktop environment is Linux itself is just like the core engine. Like all of the other stuff built around it, they're all just things that people have put together, and distributions are just packages of those things. Now with Fedora, they provide you with, I think there's like 5 or 6 different desktop environments you can install. There's GNOME, there's KDE. Those are the 2 biggest. KDE, if you've used Windows, it's a little bit more familiar to Windows users. It's laid out a little bit more like Windows, where GNOME is pretty much its own thing. Like this activities menu, that's pretty much its own thing. It stands alone in that. I wouldn't say it's necessarily hard to use, but it's different. There's also XFCE, which is one of my personal favorites. I'll probably be installing XFCE and using it. It's a little bit more hacker-friendly. It's a little bit uglier. Like it's not as pretty. It doesn't have these nice smooth effects. Like the window title bars aren't just nice and smooth and rounded and look like a kind of Tonka toys a little bit. It's very much like old school. And then there's several others. If you do download one, don't download Sugar. And I'll tell you why. This is worth pointing out.
Look at Kali.
Kali is a different distribution. It's not a desktop environment. Sugar is designed for one laptop per child project, and it is weird. Like, if you were to log in, it would have, like, this thing. I don't know how to use it, honestly. You can read about Sugar, but, like, it basically is like a mobile experience for your computer. It's weird. Like I said, no, it's worse. It's weird. I don't recommend it. Don't install Sugar. but do install some other desktop environment. I recommend KDE. I recommend XFCE. I recommend Mate. Or I forget the other name of the other one that's also popular. Even Wikipedia, on the first page, the three projects they call out by name in the first section is the CDE, which is not an open source project, but KDE and GNOME are listed. CDE is ancient. It's a relic of 1995. If you want to see how cool and awesome those graphics are, yeah, that's CDE right there. Beautiful. In contrast, KDE looks a lot better. Apparently they don't have... So this is what KDE looks like. You have a K menu down here in the bottom. Very, very similar to Windows. You have the tray, clock, all that stuff. GNOME you're using, so obviously it should be relatively familiar as to what GNOME is. But you can run the same programs. Everything's basically the same. It's just how it's presented to you. So check it out. I will give you one hint in that when you run DNF, you look for what is listed out here under groups. They have a group list, or should have a group list. Maybe. Let's do man DNF. Okay, get mad at me. Specifying groups. There's got to be more than that. Group command. So groups are virtual collections of packages. They do this because desktop environments encompass a lot of packages, like anywhere between 100 and 1,000 packages for a single desktop environment. So I do recommend using like a group list and then figuring out how to do a group install. If you go out the Fedora documentation project, I think it's docs.fedoraproject.org. They give you all sorts of documentation, and this is excellent documentation. If you want to look to see how to install a different desktop environment, this is where you'll find it. So I've given you the hints, I've given you the tools. Let's see if you guys can do it. You know, and if you can't get it done, let me know. I'm not gonna come down. I just want to see what you've done and where you're going with it. If you can't get it installed, it's not the end of the world, but at least make a good attempt. It shouldn't be terribly difficult, but I also understand this is fairly foreign. And one of the reasons I'm kind of letting you do it on your own is just to kind of, see if you guys can get it done. Because I think, everybody in here that sent me stuff so far seems pretty capable. So I think it should be a good challenge. And I hope to see some screenshots of some different desktop environments for next week. That's all I have. Anybody have any questions? There it is.
Is that a way to unalias something?
Unalias something? Yes. Good question. Let's look. How do I unalias? I already created an alias for ASDF. Let's say I don't want it anymore. We can see ASDF in here. I'm going to do an alias. Oh, that's fun. Thanks, alias. Man, alias. Source file name objects. Blah, blah, blah. It literally is unalias.
Beautiful.
Love it. So to undo an alias, you unalias. So, good question. Anything else? Anybody have any questions? Anything? Good. Most people have got everything. I've gotten emails from several people. Those of you who haven't got anything in for week 2 yet, I will kind of count week 2 and 3 together if you can get me week 3, so you don't have to be behind. But just let me know that's what you're doing beforehand. I think if there's anybody having any problems getting Linux on their system or having problems just in general, definitely let me know. I appreciate those of you who have sent me stuff. I feel like I'm pretty accommodating, so if you guys have a problem with me, let me know too. So if that's it, I'm good for this broadcast. We'll see you guys next week.
Okay. I have one question.
Oh, go for it.
Since I missed the last couple of lessons, you have a way to see the other videos you made?
Yes, actually, in tonight's Blackboard post, I put a link to my channel.
Okay.
It'll be a little bit easier just to go to the channel instead of posting every week's video URL, because my channel will just have it automatically. So it's on YouTube. I put the link in there, and I think I actually sent you an email with the link.
Okay.
I think we're good. Sorry that I haven't been updating those, but I did get that link out there, so you guys can go take a look at it now. So,
all right. Thanks.
Yep. Oh. All right. Oh, screenshots! I forgot to tell everyone how to do screenshots. Print screen. The print screen button on your keyboard makes screenshots.
Mine doesn't work either.
What, really? It might be like on the laptop, it's function. Like, yeah, it's in blue. Mine's orange.
Oh, yeah.
So if you do function, I'll do it on screen. So function print screen, it takes a nice little flash and a little sound.
Yeah, I was doing that. It wasn't working, so I just revamped the computer.
Oh, yeah. Hey, you're like power user right there. There you go. Yeah. So we're good. I'm stopping by.